Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. And don't forget to go and get that perfect drink, because I've got a lovely story for you tonight. And if you're drinking something rather unusual, let me know about it, because I do love hearing from you. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, after both of my parents retired, I was handed over the reins of the family business, with my parents still acquiring a percentage of all the profits to fund their retirement, which certainly was a lucrative way of making easy money. To access Oakfield storage units, you would have to drive through a large iron gate with a professional intercom system that went through to the site office so that anyone on duty could let you in and out of the premises at will. The storage units were built like garages, where people could store anything that tickled their fancy. We had all kinds of customers hiring out our storage units for personal and professional use. One of our clients was actually using his storage unit to store a small plane. Others stored fancy cars, personal possessions, furniture, antiques, books, farming equipment, paintings, clothes, cosmetics, office equipment, staging materials, DJ equipment, and so much more. We had hundreds of these lock-up-and-go storage units that varied both in size and cost. There was always someone on duty at the site office, manning all the storage units, handling telephone calls and inquiries, answering emails, and dealing with customers. 2 night watchmen were always on duty, night after night, during the twilight hours, guarding the premises punctiliously. They regularly patrolled and policed the asphalt roads that bordered the long vertical row upon row of built-in storage units that rather resembled garages. They also assiduously monitored the closed-circuit security cameras. If you took a right-hand turn on the asphalt road beyond the site office, it led to an ornate wrought-iron black gate with a wooden signpost that read Oakfield Manor. This was the back entranceway to our farmhouse, which was a traditional classic farmhouse with a grey slate roof, pale green shutters and large French windows. We also owned a relatively new white stables block, a red barn, and a couple of large undulating meadows, where our horses happily frolicked during the day. The left meadow was fringed by rather dense wood groves, tightly packed with tall imposing Douglas fir trees, where a straight ribbon of asphalt ran directly through its midsection, which was used by our family and friends to access the front entrance of our farmhouse, and for quick journeys to the nearby town. If you looked beyond the viridescent vertical forms of the trees, in the furthest distance, dappling the horizon, was the rise and fall of the magisterial lordly mountains, that was so transfixing they always commanded our attention. They bruised the skyline so gracefully, in a plethora of pinks, purples and blues. When my husband Jerry and I got married, I will profess that he was not exactly enamoured about taking on my father's storage unit business, but he quickly amended and modified his thinking when he became acquainted with the fruitful financial rewards of owning such an expediently advantageous enterprise. My husband judiciously extrapolated that it would almost certainly free some invaluable spare time up for us to indulge in our favourite hobbies, and as we were keen horse riders, our lifestyle soon marshalled our very best interests most favourably. My parents had been running these storage units for many years, without any major problems ever arising, until Bobby and Eric, our night security watchmen, reported peculiar activity one night that seemed to be related to storage unit number 313. This was to unearth a brutal, gruesome secret that would shock us to our core. Bobby's story. I've always been a dreadful insomniac, struggling desperately to get to sleep at night, constantly waking my wife up with my restless tossing and turning. She sagaciously suggested that it made perfect sense for me to get a nighttime job, especially as I couldn't get to sleep, for we could most certainly benefit from the extra income. That was when I began working as a night watchman for Oakfield storage units. As the new boy on duty, Eric introduces me to the ins and outs of the job, and of course the code language used on the walkie-talkie system.
It's pretty straightforward, he tells me. We have walkie-talkies, so you can let me know how things are going when it's your turn to patrol. You need to walk up and down the rows of the storage units and report back to base. We will alternate our shifts, keeping each other posted all the time. One man watches the security surveillance system here in the site office, while the other steadily patrols the premises. We keep in touch with each other via the walkie-talkies, looking out for anything untoward that grabs our immediate attention. You'll be glad to know we're connected to a security armed response team, so we call them if anything merits further investigation or is concerning to our safety. We can also contact the main house. You press this red button over here. It sounds an emergency alarm that rings through to the main house, alerting Jerry and Jennifer Patterson that they are needed on the premises at once. They will arrive here fully armed should there be an intruder.
I can see Eric is quite a lot older than I am, well, at least by 30 years or more. He might be in his early to late 60s. His skin is well weathered, very creased and bronzed, by far too much sun exposure. He's lucky to have a full head of white hair, a diamond-shaped face with long sideburns, framed by a rather short white box beard, with a distinguished-looking walrus moustache. He has piercing blue eyes that almost look right through you. He seems to be a consummate, accomplished, rather proficient night watchman that is adept to his job. I ask him why he's doing this job, as my curiosity is aroused.
It's always about the money, is it not?
Eric admits to me, tweaking the corners of his rather impressive moustache reflectively.
I found out after I retired that, let's just say, my retirement package was not sufficient to cover the cost of living, so I decided to take up night work. It's a bit of a bummer finding your retirement fund is not adequate enough, but I'm not alone in this regard. I don't mind, really. If the truth be told, I do rather enjoy working a bit. I tend to listen to the radio a lot. The twilight hours go by very quickly, I find, and before you know it, it's time to go home. What about you? What's a young man like you doing in a job like this?
Well, I do have a day job working for a lighting warehouse, but the extra money's a big bonus, is it not? I've got a wife and 2 kids of 4 and 6. My wife complains tirelessly that my inability to sleep is driving her potty, as I toss and turn all night with my senseless insomnia and keep her awake. It was her idea for me to take on night shift work.
It sounds like your missus has got her head screwed on all right. Having you out of her bed at night guarantees she finally gets some decent shut-eye,
Eric teases. Something like that, I say, grinning. For the first couple of nights, things go predictably smoothly, without any fortuitous interruptions. Me and Eric take it in turns to watch the monitors, while vigilantly patrolling the area. But on the 3rd night, something strange started to happen during my shift.
It's my turn to patrol the storage units, I say to Eric, who is reading a book.
He looks up at me and nods, taking a large sip of his coffee.
Keep me posted, bro, he says.
I leave the site office quickly. I'm immediately struck by what a tenebrous night it is. Everything appears swathed and blanketed in a velvety blackness, as an impenetrable mist has obscured the former generous ethereal luminosity from both the moon and the stars, so that their light is significantly dimmed, subdued, and rather repressed by this thick, cloying, choking fog that seems hell-bent on hanging out in the sky tonight. It is rather like the twilight has adorned herself in a menacing ambience, like an illustrious jet-black cloak. I am mollified and reassured by the sounds of the crickets and frogs, and the distant calls of coyotes, and of course the very favourable light of my torch that offers me a small measure of comfort. Without it I would not dare to venture out in this night alone, for it claws at me with a pervasive unsettling feeling that teases my flagging confidence.
In truth, I would like nothing better than to hightail it back to the sight office as fast as I possibly can. But it is my profound sense of duty to do my job thoroughly that gently nudges me ever forwards. I walk awkwardly, pressing my Doc Marten boots on the asphalt pathways, passing the long rows of innocuous storage units. I'm almost certain I see a dark shadow. Then a loud, violent flapping of wings grips my heart violently with a baleful terror, while every hair on the back of my neck is standing up on edge. I nearly jump out of my skin. I oscillate my arms, manoeuvring my torchlight towards the shifting shadow. I see a large barn owl darting down on the ground, lifting up a huge rat into its powerful talons. I sigh with relief when I realise it's only an owl. It raises its powerful wings, gliding gracefully to the top of the flat roof, perching there, clasping the rat in its claws, devouring its prey as it stuffs large chunks of the juicy flesh into its open beak. The rat shrieks, but is soon silenced, as its painful squawks ebb away. I watch the owl for a moment, as it stares at me through its bright yellow eyes, continuing to eat. It seems undaunted by my presence. "Don't do that again," I tell the owl. "You scared me half to death, flapping like that." But the complacent, apathetic owl just perches on the roof after it finished its nightly snack, and then it begins to hoot. All of a sudden I hear an ambiguous whispering sound in my ear. It is an inaudible, faint, muffled voice. It feels as if someone's lips are tickling my ears. What the heck, I think. Then something appears to be touching me on my back, tapping me like someone intent on getting my attention. I turn around, half expecting to see Eric, but nothing is there. Am I going completely stark raving mad, I begin to wonder. I realise that the owl affrighted me so much. I must have imagined things, I thought. But the whispering in my ear, I still can't comprehend. It is when I pass Unit 313, I hear a muted noise coming from inside the unit. I press my ear to the door. I'm sure I can hear an imperceptible faint woman's voice mingled within the static electricity. It's a peculiar sound, like a radio frequency that is not correctly tuned to the right station. I think someone has left a radio on in their unit, but I'm sure the battery will finally wear down, as the indistinct, evanescent sound seems to be fading. I turn around to walk away. In a trice I notice that everything has become unnaturally quiet. So deathly quiet, in fact, that you can almost hear a pin drop. This is the kind of stifling, inauspicious silence that has an unsettling vibration. I then realise exactly what's wrong. It hasn't become apparent to me before, but for some absurd reason of which I cannot explain, the sounds of the crickets and frogs that normally serenade the night have all but been vanquished. Everything has become airily still, almost as if the night itself has unnaturally clammed up. It's like there's a foreboding, threatening ambience that sends Arctic cold, icy chills plummeting down my spine. Get a grip, I tell myself, get a grip. I try to get a signal on my walkie-talkie, but I'm greeted by the undeviating static. Damn, I think. "Eric," I call, "can you hear me? Eric, can you hear me?" All I hear is the static electricity, which is exceedingly annoying. With every minute this night is becoming less and less routine. I cannot escape the unfathomable feeling that something is very, very wrong. Something is off tonight, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. I continue my walk down the different passageways, past various storage units. I get this evocative, haunting feeling that I'm not alone. It's an unearthly, atmospheric feeling. I turn around to check my immediate surroundings, using my torchlight to scan the area thoroughly. But I see nothing but a long stretch of storage units. Then ahead of me I see a woman in a nightdress running down the asphalt pathway. She looks terribly afraid. She glances at me briefly, with eyes full of trepidation. Bloody hell, I think. Who is this woman? Why on earth is she running around the storage unit in her nightdress? "Excuse me, madam. Excuse me." She looks at me. I see the one side of her head is dappled with blood. There is blood trickling down her nightdress. I think the woman is in serious trouble. She looks confused and bleary. She clearly needs help. "Excuse me, madam. Excuse me." I call after her. The woman looks at me with wide, terrified eyes. She begins to run. I pick up speed, but she seems to vanish before my very eyes. Where the hell did she get to, I wonder? I try to get through to Eric, but once again my walkie-talkie is only operating on static electricity. What the heck is going on here? I try to look for the woman, but she is nowhere to be seen. It is like she has simply vanished into thin air. How is that even possible, I think? I venture past unit number 313 again. I hear the undistinguishable radio noise has got significantly louder. I hear a woman's voice calling for help within the static frequency. "Help me! Help me!" But the sound is so discomposing that with my heart thundering through my chest, I hightail it back to the site office as quickly as I possibly can. Eric looks up at me when I enter the site office because I'm out of breath and my face has gone as white as a sheet. He has a bewildered expression upon his face. "What's wrong?" he asks, looking up at me in surprise. "Did you see a woman on the security footage?" I ask. "There was a woman. She had blood on the side of her head. She was wearing a night dress." Eric goes back to review the recorded security footage. You can clearly see me calling out, running after what appears to be nothing. "I don't understand," I say, looking at Eric in befuddlement. "There was a woman there. You can see I'm running after her, but she's not on the footage." Eric's forehead crinkles with perplexement. "You do look like you're chasing something, bro. But there is nothing there." "But I don't understand. There was definitely a woman there." "There can't have been, bro. Can you not see there is nothing to be seen on this footage?" I feel confused. I know exactly what I saw. I proceed to tell Eric that there's also a problem with Unit 313, and that when I went past it, it sounded like there was a radio on in there. It was all static, but when I'd walked past the unit again, the radio appeared louder, and amidst the static I'd heard a disembodied voice calling out for help. Stranger still, I tell him, I did try to contact him on the walkie-talkie, but it just became static. "That is extraordinary," says Eric. "Nothing like this has ever happened before. Look, I will go and investigate. I will look around. You stay here. I'll see if I can spot anything untoward." Eric's account. I had worked night shift at Oakfield storage units for 2 whole years. Nothing outlandish or peculiar had ever happened like this before. I could discern that Bobby was always level-headed and pragmatic, not given to fanciful ideas or a lucid imagination, so I wasn't certain what to make of his enigmatic account. He seemed so convinced that he'd definitely seen a woman. I studied the recorded footage closely, where he claims to have had the encounter with this mysterious, terribly frightened woman. If I look at Bobby's face on the monitor, I can see his facial expression changes from bewildered to very alarmed. He appears to be running after someone and seems genuinely confused on camera when he cannot find the woman anywhere. I can see his stupefied, aghast reaction as he walks past Unit 313. I'm certain that something freakishly incongruous has transpired, for the footage I am observing is exceedingly compelling. Maybe Bobby witnessed something spectral that is not of this world, so I tell him to keep a watch while I go and investigate. I've been a night watchman for many long years, have worked at different facilities all over North America. You do hear stories from other watchmen who claim to have had paranormal encounters. I've never had a ghostly encounter before myself, so in truth I had never really given such phenomenon any credence. Not until Bobby came into the site office looking genuinely rattled, with a face that had quite literally drained of all colour. You can't make a look like that up. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that something had really irked him. As I left the site office, I will say that from the word go, something felt distinctly off. I realised it was a lot darker than it usually is. There was a distinct chill in the air, The temperature had plummeted. It was a lot colder than it had been in the sight office, and I could see my own breath before my face. I think the most discomposing thing of all was just how eerily quiet everything was. In the 2 years I've worked at this storage unit, I have never known it this quiet before, so it was oddly bizarre, as the normal trilling of the insects was confiscated on this night. I moved my torchlight as I walked down the different roads, lined by the storage units. "Bobby, can you hear me?" Bobby answers. "Go ahead." "Everything looks fine so far, but it's quite cold and very quiet tonight." "That's what I thought," said Bobby. "Over and out," I say. I continue to investigate the area, and when I walk past 313, I hear fast feet running past me, along with frantic breathing, as if someone is desperately out of breath. But I see nothing, but I certainly felt a presence. I stand very still, casting my torch over the area, but still I see nothing. Could I have been mistaken, I wondered. I was beginning to even doubt myself. Did I rarely hear those feet running past me? As I walk past Unit 313, I do not hear any radio blaring. "Do you read me?" "Affirmative," came Bobby's voice. "I'm at Unit 313. It's very quiet. No radio sounds." "Good," said Bobby. "Over and out," I say. But as I walk away, I hear the sound of someone drumming the metal door of the Unit 313, and a woman's voice saying, "Help me! Help me!" I quickly dash over to the garage-type door, banging it. "Hello," I say. "Is anyone there? Is anyone there?" But there is no answer. I am now completely nonplussed. I don't know what to make of anything, but I quickly return to the site office. I know without a question of a doubt that something very peculiar has happened here tonight, but what, I cannot imagine. Jennifer Patterson, her account, on the very same night. I was lying in bed fast asleep. I woke up with a start. I wasn't certain why I'd woken up so suddenly, for usually I sleep like a log throughout the night. I quickly climbed out of bed, glancing out of the upstairs bedroom window that overlooks the front yard. I could see the silhouettes of the tall ponderosa pine trees blowing gently in the breeze, along with a crescent moon that seemed obscured by a hazy mist. I decided to go downstairs to get myself a cup of warm milk to drink. It would help me get back to sleep, I thought. I quickly grabbed my dressing gown, wrapping it around my middle, and slipping into my slippers. I trailed down the stairs, smiling to myself as I tiptoed past my husband, as he snores quite loudly. When I entered the kitchen, my dog Rover, a black Labrador, was sleeping in a basket in the kitchen. He was scratching at the kitchen door and whining. "What's up, boy? Do you want to have a pee?" I said. I quickly opened the back door for him, and my dog still remained in the kitchen whining. That was unusual for him. That was when I saw a tall figure that was blacker than the night, standing several feet away from the kitchen door, looking directly at me. It was indicating for me to follow it, but what the heck was it, I wondered. I grabbed the torch that was balancing on the kitchen windowsill and switched it on. Within seconds, my torchlight had lit up the creature's body. It was covering its eyes, as the bright beam of my torch seemed to feel invasive to it. I could see that this tall, hairy being was a Bigfoot. Truly, I was so astonished by what I was beholding that I had to once again bathe this creature in light in order to make absolutely sure that my eyes were not deceiving me. I'm not certain why I felt no fear, as I almost certainly should have done so, as this Bigfoot was incredibly intimidating, enormous, with a head that rose up to a pointed tip, and a body built like a tractor. It was burly and large, with long flowing dark hair that was so incredibly black it was almost navy. I think when you see something that shocks you so much, it serves to paralyze your senses, so what you are perceiving seems to be surreal, so much so that your fear capsizes like a large ship at sea, sinking to the bottom of a deep ocean, so that with no fear to propel your instincts, you allow intrigue and curiosity to guide the way, which is what I did. The Bigfoot was indicating for me to follow him, and I did so without hesitation. I assure you I was not locked under some kind of hypnotic trance, as you might expect. I sensed I needed to follow this Bigfoot, with a reluctant dog trailing behind me, who was none too happy. The Bigfoot then stopped and looked at me, his eyes locked into mine. I heard the words, "She needs your help. She cannot rest." The Bigfoot began to point at something. I couldn't see what he was pointing at, so I put my torchlight on in the direction that he was pointing to. I gasped when I saw a young woman there. She was wearing a white nightdress. Her eyes looked petrified. I noticed that there was blood trailing on the side of her head. "Hello! Can I help you?" I called, but she vanished before my eyes. Where had she gone? For only seconds she had been there, and then she just vanished. The Bigfoot looked at me. His eyes met mine again. I heard in my head, "She cannot rest. Help her." And then he glided away and was gone from my sight. "Hold on a minute," I called after the Bigfoot, but he was nowhere to be seen. Much like the woman, he also disappeared from my sight, rather like a ghost. What the heck was going on, I wondered. I remember returning to my kitchen and saying to myself, what the heck was that? I saw a Bigfoot and a strange, frightened-looking girl in one night, who vanished before my eyes. In fact, they both did. Why did the Bigfoot want my help? I didn't know who the girl was either. I proceeded to make myself a mug of warm milk and returned to bed. But the following morning when I woke up, I almost believed that the whole experience had all been but a dream, a lucid dream at that. But I soon discovered that there was dirt on my pyjamas and dressing gown, and there was a saucepan of milk on the hob, and when I ventured outside, I found a footprint in the ground that was 20 inches across, that could have only belonged to a Bigfoot. I also found that my kitchen door had been left unlocked. No, it had not been a dream. But what did the Bigfoot mean when he said she could not rest? And why had he asked me to help the strange woman who had been bleeding on the side of her head? I didn't even know who she was. It was when I went to the site offices in the morning and received the kooky reports from both Eric and Bobby about the strange anomalous experiences that they both had on the very same night as me, that I knew something inexpediently obstreperous was going on. It would seem that Bobby had seen the same young woman in a white nightdress who was bleeding on the side of the skull that I had been shown by the Bigfoot, whom had told me she needed my help and that she couldn't rest. It seemed both my night watchmen had heard a woman calling for help at one point, and both men had confronted some strange action coming from unit number 313. Bobby had thought he had heard a woman calling for help on a radio with a lot of static, while Eric had heard someone slamming the inside of the storage unit and crying out for help. I deduced that something was clearly going on within Unit 313. I opened my books and discovered that a month ago Unit 313 had been rented out by a man called Jeffrey Davies. I had remembered the man phoning our officers up, saying that he needed to hire a storage unit at once. When I met him, he seemed a bit panicky and flustered. He looked unkempt, like he hadn't shaved or bathed in a couple of days. I do not normally ever open someone's storage unit unless there's a fire hazard or something else going on. But based on what my 2 night guards had experienced the previous night, I knew I needed to open the storage unit and investigate with my husband, who was less than enamoured by the idea.
"Do you know how crazy you are sounding?" he protested. "A Bigfoot asking you to help a woman who can't rest. I'm sorry, Jennifer. You're talking complete nonsense. How can you expect me to even take you seriously? Are you having a laugh or something?"
Think what you like, Jerry, but ask both the night watchmen. They can both verify a woman was crying for help from Unit 313. And I have it on good authority that Bobby saw the very same woman in the white nightdress who had blood on the side of her head as I did. I don't think he saw the Bigfoot, though, but he definitely saw the woman.
"Bobby told you this," said my husband, "but he's so astute and level-headed. He'd never make up something like this."
Thanks a bunch, Jerry. So you're saying you believe Bobby's account? How do you think that makes me feel? What about mine? Why don't you believe me?
Well, 2 of you say you saw this strange woman, so that's good enough for me. So even though it goes against our protocol, In these enigmatic circumstances, I think we should take a look at Unit 313. Break down the lock.
My husband breaks open the lock. We open the storage unit number 313. I honestly don't know what I was expecting to see, but there was a normal black SUV car parked in the storage unit, a big drum, and a few bin liners and a couple of boxes piled high with personal items. I opened a couple of bin liners to find they were stuffed with women's clothes that looked like good designer garments that had been jumbled up in bin bags like bunches of rags. "These are quality garments," I say to my husband. "No normal person stuffs designer clothes in a bin bag like this. That's decidedly odd. These expensive clothes should be hanging on a clothes rail, even if you're donating them to charity." I open another bin liner and discover a woman's makeup bag filled with Christian Dior, Lancôme and Yves Saint Laurent makeup, and there are 3 bottles of perfume, Miss Dior, Opium from Yves Saint Laurent, and Année Année. Then I discover a selection of very expensive designer purses. One of the purses contains a passport, a driving licence and a wallet. Her name is Francesca Davies. She's 28 years old, according to these documents, I tell my husband. Why are her essential documents lying in a storage unit like this? You've got to admit it, Jerry. This is a little bizarre. Something's clearly not right here.
"Maybe she died," said my husband, "and her husband couldn't bear to throw out her stuff. So he piled it up and left it in a storage unit. Maybe this vehicle also belongs to her."
"Well, what's in this drum over here?" I asked my husband. "I think we should definitely look inside it."
"This is not our storage unit, honey. We cannot go poking our nose into someone's belongings like this. We've already done so. Everything here looks above board to me. I can't see anything untoward here."
"You can't see anything untoward here, Jerry? I can't believe you. Are you blind or something? I see a lot of things untoward here. A woman's magnificent clothes thrown into a black bin liner as if they're rags, her makeup bag containing all her makeup, and a purse with all her essentials willfully tossed into a large box. You've got to admit something's rather dodgy here. And given what the security guards witnessed last night, a woman was calling for help. You've got to open that large drum. I'm not going to be happy unless you do it, and if you don't, I'll do it myself. Then I'll feel assured we've looked over everything. I have to see what's in that drum."
"Very well," said my husband, "if you insist."
He opened his toolbox, and he pulled away the lid from the drum. Suddenly, as he opened the lid, the storage unit was filled with the most ghastly, repugnant scent of rotting flesh, feces and decay. It was a repugnant, vile smell. I will never forget that smell as long as I live. I wanted to hurl up the contents of my stomach. I felt violently sick. We looked inside the drum briefly. We saw a bloated green-looking body. It was the deceased body of a young woman.
"Oh, my God!" I screamed. "Put the lid back on, Jerry,"
I said, covering my mouth with my hands.
"Oh, my God, it's a poor girl. She must have been murdered by her husband. This is a crime scene. We have to call the police at once. Oh, the smell! I'm going to throw up. It's ghastly. I feel like vomiting."
I am very fortunate that I personally knew one of the detectives very well, working at the police station. I was able to find out all the grisly details concerning this case. I felt personally involved, as did both Bobby and Eric, who had heard the ghost of Francesca crying for help from beyond the grave. She really wanted her body found, and would not rest until it had been recovered. I realised that me and Bobby had both physically witnessed Francesca's ghost, wearing a white nightdress with a bloody patch on the side of her head that exposed the lethal gunshot. I do remember she looked as real as you or me, which was why at first I didn't comprehend she was actually a ghost. It would seem that Francesca's lost soul had even commanded the attention of a Bigfoot, whom had sought out my help. It really was an extraordinary case. One day I invited Bobby and Eric to tea, along with Officer Neil Wilson, who had been given permission by his superiors to give us the inside details of the story, given that without our intervention, Francesca would have ended up as a missing person. I prepared a delicious tea at my home, with a plethora of creamy chocolate eclairs, a lemon drizzle cake, chocolate brownies, sausage rolls and cheese muffins. I had known Neil Wilson for many years. We had been at school together, so connecting with him again was like old times.
"This is very cosy, Jennifer," said Officer Wilson, giving me a warm hug. "It seems like only the other day we were at school together. Doesn't time fly by so fast?"
It does, I laughed. I remember even in junior high you would prattle on about becoming a police officer one day. And here you are, look at you. I remember we would play cops and robbers all the time. I cannot forget how many times you placed those handcuffs on me. I think you enjoyed that far too much, if you don't mind my saying so.
"I know," grinned Officer Neil. "You know I never wanted to be anything else but a police officer. But I assure you, it's not nearly as fun cuffing people as it was cuffing you back then."
I grinned. "One thing that hasn't changed, Neil, is that you're as cheeky as ever." He laughs.
"Well, in this profession, you need a very good sense of humour."
Oh, by the way, Neil, I'd like to introduce you to Eric over here. He's been with us now for 2 years as a security watchman. And this is Bobby, who joined us not too long ago. They're both incredibly mystified by this case, as much as I am. You see, they were both eyewitnesses to the strange phenomenon that happened that night, that drew our attention to storage unit number 313. Bobby here thought he heard a radio with static going on in the unit, and he picked up a woman's voice calling out for help. And Eric here heard someone slamming the inside of the unit. A woman was calling for help there. It was all on the same night. Me and Bobby both saw a woman with a nightdress who was bleeding on the side of her head. Officer Wilson pulls out a cell phone from his pocket.
"I took a picture of what Francesca looked like when she was alive. Did the woman you saw look like this?"
He shows me the picture. My blood runs cold. "That's her! That's the girl I saw!" Then Bobby examines the photograph. His face grows white. "That was her," he agrees. "I'd recognise her anywhere." I think the thing that perturbs me the most was she seemed so real, but she was also disorientated and very confused, rather like a deer caught in headlights.
"So you both clearly saw Francesca's ghost," said Officer Wilson. "You would think I would be cynical about such things. But on the force, with many of the gruesome details we uncover, it is not uncommon to hear a ghost story attached to one of the cases. So I'm not as sceptical as you might think I am."
I can't believe I saw a ghost, I say. But I decide not to mention the Bigfoot I encountered. That would sound way too far-fetched. Most people can't get their heads around a ghost story, so bringing a Bigfoot into the equation is going a tad too far for the digestive juices of the deeply cynical person to assimilate. And given that I'm still coming to terms with what happened, I decide to wisely say nothing. Please, everyone, sit down, help yourself to some tea and snacks, and then, Neil, I'd be so thrilled if you would fill us in on all the details about what happened to Francesca Davies. Was it the husband who killed her, I ask?
"It was," said Officer Wilson, taking a bite of his chocolate brownie. "This is delicious, by the way."
"Thank you," I say.
"In many cases, especially like this, it is usually someone close to home responsible for the crime, and we always look at the husband first. The deceased woman, Francesca Davies, was bundled into a large tin drum by her husband, who had hidden all her clothes in bin bags. Even her SUV was parked in the storage unit. The coroner discovered that there was a single gunshot wound to the side of her head. The husband confessed to the murder of his wife, but given he had hired the storage unit, he couldn't point a finger at anyone else.
I suppose not, I say. I do admit that on the day he hired the unit from us, he did look particularly flustered.
"It was one of those rather tragic cases," said Officer Wilson, shaking his head sadly. "Mr. Davies was very upset. I almost felt sorry for the man. He was like any regular guy. I got the impression that he was in love with his wife, devastated by her death. In a strange way, he was heartily relieved to have been caught, as the burden of his guilt was weighing heavily on his heart and eating him alive. He was telling me he'd lost 40 kilos from all the stress." "Yes, but why did he kill his wife?" Eric asks. "I mean, what makes a man shoot his wife in the head like that, at point-blank range? I mean, me and my wife, we have our rows from time to time, I will admit. But never ever in a million years would I lay a finger on her grey head. And believe me, that wife of mine can really wind me up at times." Officer Wilson nods at Eric in agreement. I agree. But working here in the force over the years, you encounter domestics where things have gone tragically too far. It seems both Francesca and her husband had agreed together to try for a baby when she was 35 years old. She had even had her eggs frozen on ice by the gynecologist so that they could access them at a later date. Mr. Davies said they discussed this in detail, but he discovered his wife's birth control pills in the main dustbin in the backyard, so he challenged her about it. She admitted that she had been throwing them out on purpose and confessed to being 2 months pregnant. Mr. Davies told us it wasn't the fact that his wife was pregnant that upset him, but the fact that she had perfidiously gone behind his back, throwing away the birth control pills without consulting him. I gather it was her traitorous deception that riled him up considerably. He felt he couldn't trust his wife. He said trust was everything to him in a relationship, so Francesca's duplicity very much aggrieved him. He said she grinned at him and said, "But we're having a baby now." And he said he just wanted to wipe the smug smile off his wife's face, so he grabbed the revolver and he shot his wife at point-blank range. And it was only once he'd shot her that he realised the gravity of what he'd done. He then panicked. "But I'm sorry," says Eric. "I fully understand why he was grievously upset. I would be too if my wife tricked me like that. But killing her? That was outrageous." "I agree," said Officer Wilson. "I gather he panicked. He packed up all her clothes, her car and her essential items, stuffed her body in a drum, hired a storage unit. He told everyone his wife had gone on a road trip. He wasn't sure when she would be back. His plan was to get rid of all the stuff in the storage unit and dispose of his wife's body. But he wanted to think about how to hide all the evidence, so the security unit was a good stopgap for him." "And you're saying everybody just believed him?" I asked, "about his wife just going off on a road trip like that?" "Well, it would seem so," said Detective Wilson. "You see, she'd been talking about taking a road trip for a very long time, so people just thought she up and left. She was quite spontaneous, I believe." After Detective Wilson left, I was thrilled to put the pieces of the puzzle together, but I am amazed that it was a ghost of Francesca that drew our attention to Storage Unit 313, and a Bigfoot that alerted me to Francesca's ghost that needed my help. I'm glad to report that to date, both Bobby and Eric have not reported any untoward activity in our storage units. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.